what it feels like to be the parent of a highly sensitive child. And yeah, these are some things that we often hear, and it's not just from teachers, it's from everybody actually, parents of your child's friends, nursery school teachers, just people out and about, even when you're playing in the play park, and friendly people who kind of just go, oh, they notice things about children and they're friendly and they mean it well, but sometimes it forms a bit of a pattern. So in terms of, I split it into categories because actually they do kind of fall into these patterns of what people will say. So first is character, because it's so obvious the way a child is behaving. So this is a big one. You're so shy. I heard that so many times when I was younger, and I always thought to myself, I'm not really, but if you say it too often, a child starts to think they are, and then it's a bit of a perpetuating cycle. So yeah, whatever shy translates as in your local language, careful to use it, because I don't think it's a bad word, but for highly sensitives, they take on board what you're saying really quickly. So think about that one. And yeah, she often seems to play alone. Yeah, my child does too, and she has done since she was a baby. I had to actually step back and just go, stop interfering, because I was playing with her, which was so fun. But actually, she got real value from fiddling with Duplo, looking after her doll, making Sylvanian families have lunch and play in the garden and she needed to be on her own to think through these things. And I think it's maybe because if there's too much social interaction, you have to concentrate on that and you're still receiving all the other stuff. So if you can kind of refine what's being received, that helps a highly sensitive child's focus. And they have great focus, but they will get frustrated and angry if the focus is on too many things at once. Again, I think this applies to a lot of children, right? So it's not just highly sensitives, but these are things that happen in the classroom because there's so much stimuli all the time. You know, it's okay sometimes for them to play alone in the playground because that may be the only time when they let off steam. And as professionals and experts, you know when that's a bad thing. The child will show you that they're feeling sad, they'll tell their parents, you know. So if that is not happening, consider they might be highly sensitive and that they need it. Yeah, she likes to observe before joining in. We hinted at that before. There's a degree of caution involved with being highly sensitive, which is actually good. If our politicians were a little more cautious, perhaps we wouldn't be in quite such a mess. You notice so much. Yeah, they kind of do, especially the extrovert ones, actually, because my daughter is an extrovert. She will tell me everything she notices about literally everything. Like if we're in the garden, she'll notice the light on the leaves and what the sounds are and which bird is that, and kind of, we only have a city yard, it's nothing special, but she's interested in it. And you kind of have to pick what you're going to talk about. Either you get a highly sensitive extrovert child can also be a bit of an energy draw, so you have to be careful of that as a teacher, I think, as well, whilst also encouraging them. And why are you taking so long? This is a big one with my daughter and me. Transitions are hard for them in the same way they might be for a very autistic child or somebody who's got ADHD. You need to prepare them in advance. So it helps. Once they've got the structure of the day, say you're in a primary school, if there's a very clear structure, you don't need it as much because they'll just be like, well, this is what we always do, it's fine. But if you're getting them ready for school and they're just getting used to it, consider adding 20 minutes to 30 minutes to your routine. It means getting up a bit earlier, but it makes a huge difference to the smoothness of the day. And you don't have to do it forever because once they're used to it, they'll go really fast. But yeah, they don't like being rushed. That can also result in quite anger and quite a lot of frustration or sadness. And yeah, we still struggle with that now, by the way. And my daughter's nearly 9. We had a problem today with it. Yeah, and ability, she's well ahead of her peers. Now, this is the thing we have to be careful with because I kind of feel like giftedness, we need to be careful about that word. But they have, highly sensitive children might not be the best academically, they might not be the best with sports or art. It's not really about that. It's more that because they receive a lot and notice a lot, when they are learning to finally focus and express what they're noticing, quite a lot of very gentle magic happens, and you can't really test it. They are often quite creative and artistic, or also brilliant at sports or even academic things, but I don't think that tells you that child is highly sensitive. I think it's more, if you're a lunchtime supervisor and there's a child who always comes to you and says, I think there's trouble brewing there, or it sounds like they're like the classroom gossip, but actually what they're doing is telling you that they're interested in that behavior. So they don't necessarily want you to take action, but they just really want to know what's going on there. You know, why are my friends feeling this way? And they want to get to the bottom of something, and they're quite forensic about it sometimes. And they can be fascinating to talk to, but yeah, again, be careful how much attention you give them, otherwise the other kids might be thinking what's going on. But that's the kind of, they're socially ahead often, socially and emotionally advanced in a way that you might not see in every other child. Even the most academically gifted ones might not have that aspect. And they love art and dance. Well, mine does anyway, but that might be, bear in mind, a lot of these might be a bit specific to my child, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just gleaning this from research, talking to a lot of different people and my own experience. Yeah, and other children go to him or her for support and answers. Often it's because they're quite nice kids. They're the nice ones in class. You know, they're very careful to be nasty because they feel the hurt inside them, and if they say a nasty thing, they'll feel quite guilty and ashamed of it immediately. I kind of know this from my own childhood too, that I couldn't ever join in with any bullying or nasty words, even if I thought, you know, there was a child in my class who had trouble with his nose. He always had a runny nose and everyone teased him for it. It was horrible, and, you know, it was quite bad. And I wasn't the brave one who stepped in to stop it in the playground, but I also couldn't ever say, oh, David, look at you, you're just got, you know, all the horrible things other kids were saying. If there's a child who consistently isn't nasty, then that doesn't necessarily make them high sensitive. Of course it doesn't. It makes them a nice child, but I think they're more likely to be kinder from a younger age, even when it's difficult to be kind, actually. My daughter is always asking me about behaviours at school, and when somebody's unkind to her, we have to do quite a lot of work on what her mindset is doing. So having a really good positive growth mindset, but also being accepting of negative emotions is super good. If you can cultivate that as a teacher, they will notice, high sensitives will notice, oh, that person's always naughty, but you know what, my teacher manages them and she accepts them as they are. They will notice that, and then they'll start to apply it to themselves, which is very cool. Yeah, social skills. So other friends might say, oh, why don't you just join in, you know? And the child may join in, or they may say, I don't really want to, or actually I will, but just for a minute, or, you know, kind of. It's also, parents will say it sometimes in playgrounds, or even parents of the highly sensitive child sometimes, when they haven't realised, they might say it, and actually it can do a bit of damage, that, because if you're small and you hear someone say, why can't you just do exactly the same as that child or this child or your sister or brother, you start to feel a little bit judged, and then that can lead to feelings of shame about who you are. So these small set questions that we all ask often can be more powerful than you think. And we've covered the next one, I think. Behavior, likewise, this is where we're getting into things that parents might say, actually, and definitely mine said to me. I had to be really, I've even said it to my own daughter, like, nobody's perfect, but things like this, if they're heard from a parent or a teacher, can be, you know, make them feel quite bad. So why is she so sensitive to criticism? If a teacher says that to a parent of a highly sensitive, and the child is there on a parent-teacher meeting, they'll just think, oh my goodness, you know, they don't like me. Or she had too much empathy for others and not enough for her himself. And that's actually a very empathetic thing to say. I've heard that too. I wonder whether there is such a thing as too much empathy, but it is possible when it comes to only looking after other people and not themselves. So the highly sensitive child, it's good to kind of observe closely how they do their friends, because it would be a bad idea to pair them up with someone who is very forceful. Good leaders can be a great pairing with an HSC, but if you're doing something like group work, or you're thinking about seating plans for the following year, or putting certain friends together, or recommending them for secondary level or something, it's probably a good idea to kind of think, yeah, maybe not that person who never listens to other children, or maybe not that person who always has to be leader, or maybe not that person who can't take turns yet, even though they're 11. You know, that kind of person is going to be a bit toxic for a highly sensitive child, whereas another child might deal with it better. So how you pair children also comes into this, and I'm a big believer in definitely mixing up the children and making sure they have exposure to lots of different types of people. It's brilliant, but I think highly sensitive children need a little bit more sensitivity around that from the people who are organising it for them. And yeah, this one I heard loads. She cries too much for her or his age. Now, what age do you stop crying a lot? I mean, that really upset me when I heard it, actually, because I thought crying has to be a good thing, you know, it's an expression of an emotion. It can mean that you've been hurt, but you need to do it. It's there for a very good biological reason, you know. So I think that doesn't relate to age to begin with. And also they may be crying because they're not able to tell you what's wrong, because they are sensitive to something, but they can't necessarily put it into words or share it with you because they don't actually trust you enough to tell you. So careful of anyone who says that. And reacting strongly, it's similar. So yes, they do react strongly, but all children react strongly. The younger they are, the more they react. And actually with highly sensitives, it's more a response than a reaction. And it always tells you something about something being wrong. For a very long time, our daughter was coming home crying and having tummy aches and all sorts of psychosomatic things. And it worried us. That was before we sort of worked this out. But when I read about high sensitivity, I thought, okay, that makes sense. So every time this is happening, it's not something about at home, because we thought it was. Something is occurring at school. So we would just gently say, Maisie, if you want to tell us something about your day, you don't have to, but you can tell us at any time in the week about something. And eventually she just sort of would say things when she felt like she needed to, and we just listened. We didn't try to fix it. And now she still does that, and it's helped immensely. And I wonder, again, probably that would help all kids. So a lot of things that help highly sensitive kids helps all of them, I think. And the last one is communication. So she prefers listening to speaking. Yeah, quite a lot of the time we do. Even the most extrovert of HSCs might prefer that, because actually, if you think about it, I'd be interested to see if you agree as teachers, actually, but I've always thought a lot of learning happens when you listen. Not that teaching should be didactic, but like active listening, you know, where you absorb some information and let it filter. And it can take an hour, days, weeks for a child to have a response to something you've said. Doesn't mean they're the thickest in the class. It means that they're giving it real thought. So a child who comes to you and says, hey, I had this idea, and you think, oh God, that was in my planning 3 weeks ago. You know, you kind of feel like you've done it. Well, bear with them if they've got time, because they've probably had quite an interesting insight about something you were talking about in class. And I like that you can chat with me about everything without judging me. Now, other children have said that about my child. I've heard them say it within earshot, not necessarily using those words, but basically they're saying, thanks for being my friend, you understand me. I don't know if this is Maisie in particular, but I think it is partly her trait that she will give everyone the benefit of the doubt, which I think is great, but can also be dangerous. It's a sort of innocence, but it's more to do with the fact that they know how it feels to feel slighted, shamed, smaller, being told that they are something that they aren't because people have just judged without actually getting to know them. They kind of identify with it. So any child who's struggling in class, I mean, don't be careful because they'll have their friends. But if there is a newcomer, say there's a newcomer from a new country or somebody who has some sort of difficulty or difference about them that will be obvious at the beginning, if you put that child on the table with a highly sensitive child, I can't say for sure, but my prediction would be that they'll be okay because that little child will kind of, without even thinking about it, be helpful. They may not be the most open or talkative with them, but they'll notice stuff about them and try and include them. And then the intuitive thing is definitely a thing. People always go, yeah, like me and my daughter we do have the same thoughts at the same time, which is, this sounds really kind of woo-woo, but it isn't. It's actually because there's something about highly sensitives that where the mirror neurons are like a bit more activated, apparently. So that's what gives us empathy, but it also allows you to kind of know what someone is feeling before they talk. You can read parts of their body language and how they look at everything and how they're responding to their environment. You don't necessarily think you're doing this, but there's something computing quite fast with it. Everybody can do it, but HSCs are like, honestly, they're like light year, especially children. They're quite amazing. And I feel like I know a few other kids now, apart from my kid, who might be, but I don't want to diagnose them because I'm not like, I'm not an expert, but you do see a difference with that. And it can be helpful, but it also needs to be managed because they're not like mediums or anything like that. But yeah, I think we underplay that a bit as well because it can be very useful. It can be great when it comes to making decisions. If a child is struggling with a particular type of learning, say they're super good at language, but they struggle with maths, a simple example, it might not be that maths will always be hard. It might just be that you need to inject more of what they're really good at into the thing they're not so good at. Or maybe sit them next to a child who loves maths and that will rub off with the social stuff so that they can enjoy the academic side more. You have to get a bit creative about strategy with HS.